I thought I was just going to fix a water heater. I didn't know I was walking straight into the loneliest night of someone's life, and maybe my own. The call came just after sunrise, when the light was still soft and forgiving, when the world feels like it hasn't made any mistakes yet. By noon, I was standing on the porch of a house that looked perfectly normal, holding my toolbox, completely unaware that one simple sentence would change everything. Before we step inside this story, take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Midnight Tales, if you believe in kindness and second chances. Because sometimes, the smallest act of showing up can mean everything. Her name was Marissa Hale. She was my best friend Owen's older sister, the kind of woman who always seemed composed, always perfectly put together at family barbecues, always smiling in a way that didn't invite questions. I hadn't seen her in over a year, not since Owen moved across the country for work. When he called and asked if I could check on her broken water heater, I didn't hesitate. I worked as a maintenance technician. Fixing things was the one part of life that made sense to me. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon when she opened the door. The house smelled faintly of lavender and something warm, like cinnamon. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, painting soft gold lines across the hardwood floor. She looked different than I remembered, not older, but quieter. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and there were shadows beneath her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. She thanked me for coming, her voice steady but thinner than usual. I followed her to the basement, where the water heater stood like a tired metal giant in the corner. It didn't take long to diagnose the problem. A failed heating element and sediment buildup from years of neglect. I knelt on the cool concrete floor, tools clanking softly, explaining what needed to be replaced. She nodded as if she understood, but her mind seemed somewhere else entirely. While I worked, I noticed how silent the house was. No television humming in the background. No music. No distant sound of another person moving in another room. Just the ticking of the pipes and the faint scrape of my wrench. It felt less like a home and more like a place holding its breath. By late afternoon, I restored the hot water. When I turned the valve and heard the tank refill smoothly, I felt that familiar satisfaction. Problem identified, problem solved. Simple, clean. I packed up my tools, wiped my hands, and headed upstairs to let her know everything was working again. She was sitting at the dining table, sunlight now softer and slanting, the day beginning its slow descent toward evening. There was a single glass of red wine in her hand. Not celebratory, not indulgent, just something to hold. I told her it was fixed. She smiled, genuinely this time, and thanked me again. I started toward the door, already thinking about the errands I needed to run before dark. That's when she said it. She asked me not to let her stay up alone tonight. The words weren't flirtatious. They weren't reckless. They were fragile, almost embarrassed. As if she hated needing to say them at all. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. Outside, the world was still bright. Children were riding bikes down the street. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. It was the kind of peaceful suburban afternoon that promises an uneventful evening. But inside that house, something heavy lingered. I asked if everything was okay. She hesitated for a long time before answering. Then the truth came out in pieces. Her husband had left 3 months ago. No dramatic fight, no explosive betrayal, just a slow erosion of love that ended in a quiet conversation. And a packed suitcase. They had tried therapy. They had tried pretending. In the end, they ran out of reasons to keep trying. Since then, nights had become unbearable. The silence felt louder after sunset. The bed felt larger. The dark corners of the house seemed to stretch. She wasn't afraid of ghosts or intruders. She was afraid of her own thoughts. The endless loop of what she could have done differently, what she should have noticed, what she had lost. She said the mornings were manageable. Daylight gave her structure. She could clean, answer emails, water the plants. But at night, when the world slowed down, her loneliness roared. I looked at her then. Not as my best friend's sister, not as the composed woman from family gatherings, but as someone drowning quietly in plain sight. I thought about all the times I had gone home to my small apartment and turned on the TV just to avoid the silence. I thought about how I'd told myself I preferred being alone because it was easier than being disappointed. Maybe we were both just tired of pretending we didn't need anyone. So I stayed, We moved to the back patio while the last of the daylight lingered. The air was warm but not stifling, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. She poured a second glass of wine, and I accepted it, even though I rarely drank. We didn't talk about her husband anymore. Instead, we talked about ordinary things: Owen's terrible cooking in college, my failed attempt at starting a landscaping business, the way the neighborhood kids always knocked over her mailbox with stray baseballs. As the sun dipped lower, the sky turned a soft orange-pink. Shadows lengthened across the yard. I noticed how her shoulders slowly relaxed, how her laughter, at first cautious, began to sound real. It wasn't that I was fixing her pain. I couldn't. But maybe I was reminding her that she wasn't invisible. When darkness finally settled, she tensed slightly, almost instinctively. I saw it in the way she glanced toward the windows. So I stood up and offered to help her change a few burnt-out porch lights. We worked together under the fading glow, replacing bulbs, tightening screws. The house seemed brighter afterward, less intimidating. Inside, we made simple food: grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Nothing fancy. But there was something sacred about sharing a meal at a small kitchen table while night pressed gently against the glass. Hours passed without us noticing. At some point, she admitted she had almost canceled the repair appointment that morning. She had almost convinced herself she didn't deserve help for something as small as hot water. That confession hit me harder than I expected. How often do we decide our problems aren't worth anyone's time? By the time the clock crept past 10, the house no longer felt suffocating. It felt lived in, warm. She looked at me with eyes that weren't heavy with panic anymore, just tired in a normal, human way. I realized then that fixing the water heater had been the easiest part of my day. The harder part, the braver part, had been staying. If this story is touching your heart, take a moment to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes your words might be the comfort someone else is searching for. Before I left, she thanked me again, not for the repair, but for the company. She said she didn't feel so afraid of the dark anymore. And as I stepped onto the porch, I understood something I hadn't before: loneliness doesn't always need grand solutions. Sometimes it just needs someone willing to sit beside it until it softens. So here's a special request. Comment: I believe in second chances, if you think no one should have to face their hardest nights alone. Driving home under the quiet stars, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt human. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like enough.